is it? Am I truly ready to see the light?
My eyes are blue.
They're more sensitive and beautiful.
We must know what the weather looks like.
No, stay indoors. Never face the light.
But if you look outside, your future's so bright.
Has this ever happened to you? Well, you should try Polar Pro's brand new Variable ND goggles. Listen, we've all been indoors way too much this year, and the chances of our corneas recovering from the looming darkness in our lives is low. But there is a slight glimmer of hope, the PMVND.
Wow.
Try them today. Some assembly required, batteries not included. Polar Pro does not endorse this message, and I can barely believe they sent Zach these filters to review. Thank you so much to Polar Pro for sending me these ND filters. We got some juicy footage for your eyeballs today, folks, so strap in and feel free to skip around in the video using the timestamps in the description if you're in a hurry. Here we have two beautiful ND filters from Polar Pro. Both are 2 to 5 stop variable NDs with the Peter McKinnon stamp of approval. What's up, guys? One is the Peter McKinnon Signature Edition Mark II, and the other is the Peter McKinnon Mist Edition, which is the world's first variable ND with diffusion built into the filter. Now, if you're more of a beginner and you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, here's a quick crash course on ND and diffusion. You've probably heard every camera YouTuber on God's green earth say, ND is sunglasses for your camera lens. That's actually pretty accurate. But let's go a little deeper. To get realistic motion blur, we typically set our shutter speed to be double that of our frame rate. So if you're shooting in 24p, you have a 1/48 shutter. If you're shooting in 60p, you have a 1/120th shutter, and so on. But what happens when you're shooting outdoors? If you practice the shutter speed rule that I just taught you, well, your footage is gonna be pretty overexposed outdoors. Which leaves you with two options. One, crank your shutter speed, which will fix your exposure, but it'll introduce janky ass motion blur. Option two, use an ND filter, you dang dingus. It's easy to do, you just screw it on the front.
Do it.
So that's the reason you should use ND filter. Hey, you didn't let me explain diffusion so they can understand the MISTY filter?
Ken, just hold off for a second. You'll get your chance.
Fine, but they better be ready.
Gosh. Sorry. Let's jump straight into some test footage and comparisons. To start things off, I got a shot of my friend Caden with no ND filter, which means I corrected my exposure with shutter speed. You know, the thing Ken just told you not to do. For all these tests, I shot with the Fuji X-T4 and the Sigma 18-35 adapted to the camera using the Fringer adapter. It was pretty bright that day, so I set the lens to f4 and just changed my exposure using shutter speed. When you stop down on a lens, it can potentially change the characteristics of how the image looks, so I decided to just use shutter speed for exposure changes. That way we're getting the most accurate comparisons possible. So here is our control shot. No ND, exposure corrected with shutter speed. Now here's the Peter McKinnon VND Signature 2 at 2 stops, which also looks nice to me. Okay, so now we have the PMVND Mist Edition at 2 stops, which also looks similar to control. It doesn't have as much diffusion as I thought it would, but we'll get into that in a bit. So let's bump up to 5 stops on all these VNDs. Here's the Signature Edition. You can see that the color tones look colder than that same filter at 2 stops. And just so you know, I color graded all these clips with the exact same settings that I used to grade the control shot. And I tried to make that control shot look simple, somewhat natural, that way we can see the obvious differences between the filters. All right, let's move on to the Mist Edition at 5 stops, which also has the same cooling effect as the Signature Edition at 5 stops. Before I mention my thoughts on these filters, I wanna take a little deeper dive into this Mist Edition and how much diffusion it actually has. All right, Ken, go ahead, tell them what diffusion is. Diffusions. You've probably heard of Pro Mist or Cine Bloom, both of which are diffusion filters. In a nutshell, all diffusion does is create halation or light flare around light sources. Oftentimes, diffusion filters are used to create stylized highlight bloom, soften an image subtly, or in extreme cases, they'll be used to soften the skin of actors or actresses. Their most common visual characteristics are highlight bloom and reduced contrast of the image. Back to you, Zachy. Okay, we're doing a quick test to see how much mist the variable ND Mist Edition has. So this is just my 20mm lens on the A7S III no filter. Now here is a 1/8 Pro Mist. So we're looking at this light here, looking at the halation. Adds a little bit, doesn't affect the rest of the image too much, which I like. This is the 10% Cine Bloom from Moment. Now this one is pretty drastic. It takes away contrast from the entire image. It's just a lot. It's too much for me in most cases. I really like this 1/8 Pro Mist from Tiffin because it doesn't really affect much other than the highlights. And this is the 2 to 5 stop Mist Edition Variable ND from Polar Pro. And it looks like there's just a little bit of highlight flare from this light back here. You can see there's a little bit of an outline, kind of a nice little softness there, but not too drastic. I came to the conclusion that the Mist Edition VND would compare to about a 1/16 Pro Mist if that existed. Right now, I think the least strength you can get is a 1/8, which we have on the camera right now, and it looks pretty nice. The Mist VND has a little bit weaker effect than the 8th Pro Mist that I use, so I don't know, it could be about like a 10th or 16th. I don't really know. But here's the good news, it's not too strong. And if you want a stronger halation effect on your footage outdoors, you can just stack another diffusion filter between your lens and your ND. And just for kicks and gigs, here's what the Signature Mark II Edition VND looks like with a 10% Moment Cine Bloom between the lens and the ND, which is too strong for what I like. So here's what the 8th Pro Mist looks like with the Signature Edition VND, which is the one with no mist built into it. So if you know you want a little bit of diffusion on your outdoor footage, you can buy the Mist Edition, or if you want full control of your mystification, you could just get the Signature Edition and then stack your own diffusion filters underneath it. Instead of me just giving you my opinion, I'm just gonna state the facts that I found, and you can decide for yourself what you think. Both Polar Pro filters look pretty natural at 2 stops. The Polar Pros get cooler as you stop down closer to 5 stops. Each Polar Pro costs $250 for one 82mm lens, or $450 for a 2-pack, which also comes with a 6 to 9 stop version of the ND filter you choose. Here's a couple notable mentions about the Polar Pro filters. They have hard stops, so you don't have to worry about messing up your exposure or accidentally bumping it while you're filming. But you don't have to stay within those hard stops. You can definitely ride the line and still have your exposure adjusted to the T if that's what you need. The build quality of the PPVNDs is outstanding. They're solid, yet small and very sleek, and they look absolutely gorgeous from a design standpoint. I recently bought the Nomadic filter case to hold all my various filters from this video. The Polar Pros fit perfectly in there, but also with the Polar Pro filters, you don't actually need a case if you don't want one, because the thing that they come packaged in is a perfect case. It also acts as a lens cap in front of the filter. You can use it to screw it on your camera. It's really nice, really high quality. Also, their packaging was very minimal and eco-friendly, which I definitely appreciate. Thank you for watching. Let's attempt to both like and subscribe to this video and video channel, but do not ring that bell. You need to live a notification-free life, free of distraction. We love you here at Kinotika. We wish you the best and hope you enjoy what you're creating. See you next week, folks. ND's nuts, got him.